we have a session by Ernesto Bianchi, Director of Investigations at European Fraud Office, OLAF. Since 2015, Mr. Bianchi has served as the Director of Trade and Customs Fraud, Tobacco and Counterfeit Goods, and Agriculture and Structural Funds at the European Anti-Fund Office at the European Commission. Prior to this, Mr. Bianchi held several positions, including the head of the unit Common Fisheries Policy and Aquaculture, Directorate General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries, and head of the Department of Fundamental Rights and Rights of the Child at the Directorate General for Justice at the European Commission. Please welcome Mr. Bianchi.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I'm honored and pleased to be with you today to speak about fraud. And I'm very happy to do so just after the very interesting discussion that we've heard in the panel that has just finished. Fraud is the bank of criminals. It's easy money, relatively easy money, of course, with less punishment. These are administrative violations, so the risks are lower. If you're caught, the penalties are not as high. Organized crime uses fraud quite a lot, and we see it quite a lot in our line of business of administrative investigations. And they do that in order to not only make money, but also to infiltrate the real economy and to essentially launder the profits of their money. But of course, it goes together with other crimes like corruption and bribery, which again pollutes public administration quite a lot. The cost is huge. We've just heard environmental cost is really substantive. Health and safety, this is what we eat, what we drink, what we put on our body, what runs in the engines of the things that we use every day. It's medicines. It touches upon competitiveness, the competitiveness of our societies, of our industries. And of course, it has a very adverse effect on jobs and on public policy. Fraud in the digital age has been given an additional gift. Fraudsters have been working very easily across borders, always. It's one of the main features of fraud. What we see today is not only this trans-border activity going on, but being facilitated by a very quick, very swift adoption of technology, of IT, of the advantages of digitalization to become even harder to get and to do even better from their point of view. If we look, for example, at the flows of substandard and counterfeit goods, which affect the entire planet, we see that very clearly. Cross-border, as I said, is one of the main features of fraud. The criminal design is broken down in tiny pieces, very hard to detect, very hard to see, very hard to understand from any authority working alone in any country, sometimes even in regional groupings of countries. This is the case for the European Union. We have to work very hard in order to understand what is going on, because we only see pieces. Each one of us gets to see a tiny piece. Putting that all together requires quite a lot of effort. Fraudsters are also very good at spotting. They know them sometimes even before we know them. The fault lines in jurisdiction, in areas of competence, they don't have that, but we do, and we need to respect that. They're very good at spotting weak links in implementation, gray areas in legislation and in administrative practice, and they put them to use ruthlessly. We've seen them also being really on the ball on knowing where weaknesses in administrations could be due to lack of resources or lack of technology, lack of IT. And again, they go there very quickly. They exploit ruthlessly all trade facilitation tools like transshipment. We've all come across cases like that. Free trade zones are also very often exploited and used for their purposes. And last of all, we've learned hard lessons during the pandemic. World events like that one, situation of crisis, become also a springboard for what they want to do, and they go there very, very quickly. Let me just tell you one particular story that we learned in the European Union that has really taught us lessons on face masks. You remember when face masks were impossible to find and were selling on the internet at very high prices. Well, we had very quickly opportunist companies that were either dormant or selling toys or selling things that have nothing to do with face masks, becoming very active in procuring themselves face masks in order to sell them on. We've seen chains of intermediaries being opened up in third countries, different jurisdictions, in order to hide the tracks of what they were doing. And we had face masks of very dubious quality arriving in Europe that we could not do anything about because the system of checks that we had put in place was functioning only locally. In other words, the authority of each one of the member states of the European Union were checking the quality of the face masks that were coming in. But when face masks were arriving in one country, in one of the member states of the European Union, all the other member states were assuming that those goods were being controlled also for the others, and they weren't. So that's how we ended up wearing face masks that were not really doing what they were supposed to be doing. The second advantage, the second competitive advantage that fraudsters have developed, as I said, is on really developing sophisticated logistical skills. They know very well the trade, they know very well shipping, they know very well financial tools, they know very well online tools. They've embraced very quickly the power of the internet to do what they have to do, and in doing so, they have made our lives collectively even more difficult. Big containers containing lots of stuff are now broken down in millions of parcels arriving, very hard to detect. We don't know what's in them very often. And we need to look ahead also at what is coming, because we are struggling coping with internet, fraud on the internet, and we are only beginning to imagine what it will be with the metaverse when that starts arriving, and we're really going to be in trouble there. I've set out a few challenges. Let's look at the possible answers. The title of this panel is I'm supposed to be talking also about how to tackle these types of fraud. First of all, one of the main lessons that we've learned, and we see this sinking in almost all countries in the world now, is the need for cross-agency cooperation. Combating fraud means really putting together the knowledge and the control that different actors can play in each country. So we're talking about the enforcement bodies, and we're talking about judges, prosecutors, we're talking about the police. We also need to look at the work of administrative authorities. In the previous panel, we've heard about licensing, we've heard about authorization, we've learned about the role that these bodies play, and of course how any lack of connection between the work of the enforcement body and of this administrative body can be exploited very quickly. We have customs, of course, as one of our defense mechanisms, and investigative bodies, a bit like the European Anti-Fraud Office, to protect us. We have inspectors, food inspectors, phytosanitary inspectors. If this system doesn't work as a system, we're not well protected. There's other stakeholders that we've learned to in a way, talk to. These are producers association, right holders as well, consumer associations. They have knowledge that is precious for us and that we need to capitalize on. The second answer, we've heard it I think all day, is international cooperation. International cooperation is bilateral, it's between member states, but it's also multilateral. And I think it takes a very significant dimension when it happens at regional level. But again, as we've learned in the European Union, even just stopping at the regional level may not be enough. We cannot work without engaging in partnership with third countries outside Europe, because the world is just a single space. So there's no Europe that we can look at that does the trick, really. So what we need this international cooperation for is not just to get together and talk, which is always nice, but is to share knowledge. We create now more and more knowledge building events that put together actors in different parts of the world so that we share what we know. And very often sharing what we know means really seeing the pieces of that puzzle building up in that room. It's quite empowering, it's quite interesting. We need to do more of that. We also need to do operational work together. Joint customs operations is one of them. We need to kind of do targeted work in joint customs operation, again as a learning process, but also as an action point to be able to kind of see what it is that we can do to kind of at least stop or make these traffics more difficult. We also need, and that's something that we can do with events like the one today and joint operational work that we do together, we need to build a community, trust. It's very hard to reach out to somebody in another country if you know nothing and if you know nobody in that country. So that's also another important thing. And we hope, and we have tried, and we put together at the European Anti-Fraud Office also at sort of pilot projects. We are trying to kind of foster and create these communities of colleagues that trust each other and know each other. For example, we have created now a rapid alert system that connects the main ports in the origin and in the destination countries and in the transit hubs. And we are trying to make the work simple, but not asking anyone to open anything, but just to follow shipments, to see where they go and what happens with them. And to do something that we really need to, and I'm coming to my last point, need to do better together in this complex, very well connected and internet world, which is the data. Do we have the data that we need today? Not always. I think we have to be honest. There's a lot more than we need to do. For example, on containers, I think we have a basis to build on. On online sales, internet, not so good. When we look at the work that we do in the European Union, very often we don't even know some basic information like who's the real buyer and who is the real seller behind a transaction, and that's not okay. If we manage to be good enough and to get the data, then the next thing we need to look at is what to do with it. We are talking potentially about very big data, huge data. So how do we process that data? Machine learning, artificial intelligence, yes. This is the obvious solution, the obvious way to go. Again, I think, in international dialogue and cooperation, we need to make sure that we don't create systems that don't talk to each other, because again, that would really kind of not be useful for us. And then we need to take the last step, which is going from data, even artificially managed data, to using the data to produce intelligence. Because it's only through intelligence that we have a hope of fighting phenomena of fraud that have as a consequence the things that we've heard even in the previous panel. We are talking about pesticides containing illegal substances going around the planet and potentially killing bees. we are talking about CITES products being traded, and nobody even knows that these are goods that cannot be traded. So it's really important that in a world where resources are scarce, and we all suffer from the same syndrome, we're able to pull together what we have, pool our knowledge, pool our resources in a world that uses data in an intelligent, focused way, so that when we go about and take joint actions, joint operational actions, we at least know what we want to do and we know what we're looking for, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to find it. I'll stop here. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and it's been a pleasure really feeling for this day, for this couple of days, part of this community, of this really important community for all of us. And I'd like to thank again the government of the United Arab Emirates for this initiative, and Dubai Police for having us at this event. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.